รื่องราวกล่าวขานมานานหากใครได้จับหิ่งห้อยมาเก็บเอาไว้ใต้หมอนนอนคืนนั้นจะฝันดีจะฝันเห็นดวงดาวมากมายฝันเห็นเจ้าชายเจ้าหญิงฝันแสนสวยงามเด็กน้อยนั่งตักคุณยายไต่ถามความจริงยายยิ้มกินหมากหนึ่งคำไม่ตอบอะไรสายหูใจเด็กน้อยอยากเห็นจริงอยากเห็นดวงดาวมากมายอยากเห็นเจ้าชายเจ้าหญิงอยากฝันสวยงามหิ่งห้อยนับร้อยนับพันส่องแสงระยิบระยับกันสว่างไสวไปทั้งต้นลำพูเด็กน้อยแอบออกมาไล่คว้าแสงน้อยมาดูใส่ไว้ในกล่องงามหรูซ่อนไว้ใต้หมอนแล้วนอนคอยฝันดีพอได้ลืมตามองเห็นคุณยายมาแกล้งถามว่าเจออะไรสนุกแค่ไหนที่ฝันใจเด็กน้อยจึงทบทวนไม่ฝันเห็นอะไรมากมายรีบค้นเร็วไวใต้หมอนเปิดฝานั้นดูหิ่งห้อยในกล่องตอนนี้เหมือนนอนตัวหนึ่งไม่สวยดังซึ่งตอนอยู่ใต้ต้นลำพูส่องแสงยายจึงยิ้มแล้วสอนตามจะมองเห็นความงามที่จริงอยากขังความจริงไม่เห็นอยากขังความงามหิ่งห้อยนับร้อยนับพันส่องแสงระยิบระยับกันสว่างไสวไปทั้งต้นลำพูเด็กน้อยถือกล่องออกมาเปิดฝาแล้วแง้มมองดูนอนน้อยในกล่องงามหรูก็เปล่งแสงสุขใสบินไปรวมกันเด็กน้อยนอนหลับสบายอมยิ้มละไมใต้หมอนไม่มีกล่องอะไรไม่มีสิ่งใดๆถูกขังนอนคืนนั้นจึงฝันดีฝันเห็นดวงดาวมากมายฝันเห็นเจ้าชายเจ้าหญิงฝันแสนสวยงามลาลาลาลาลาลาลาลาลาลาลาลาลาลาลาลาลาลา
Hello, everyone. I would like to welcome to everyone in the Zoom platform to the Firefly Forum 2.0, sharing space with fireflies. Ladies and gentlemen, we start our first forum agenda with welcoming message from the Firefly International Network Chair, Dr. Christopher Grassley. Before I pass the floor to Dr. Christopher Grassley, allow me to introduce Dr. Christopher Grassley. Dr. Christopher Grassley is a professor of biology at Fitchburg State University. He earned his bachelor degree in biology from Brown University in 1991 and his PhD at Tufts University in 2000. His doctoral research at Tufts with Dr. Sarah Lewis focused on the potential selective and adaptive role of female mating preferences for flash signal characteristic in Potinus ignitus and Potinus pyralis fireflies. For the past 20 plus years at Fitchburg State University, he has continued to study the evolution of firefly flash signals, expanding his research to incorporate the interaction of the fireflies and potential predators. In partnership with the Massachusetts Audubon Society, Dr. Cressley also helps run a community science project, Firefly Watch, focused on monitoring firefly population in North America. Both through Firefly Watch as a science educator, he tries to use fireflies as an ambassador taxon to educate the public about the natural world. As a chair of the Firefly International Network Steering Committee 2022 to 2025, he is also trying to help bring together fellow fireflyers engaged in research, community science efforts, and other firefly-focused projects to share ideas and promote the work being done with this fascinating organism. Without further ado, Dr. Christopher Cressley, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much. Welcome, everybody. I have a simple job to do here, which is simply to let you all know how grateful we are, people, both our presenters and our viewers here, taking time this morning to come and join us and celebrate fireflies at a time when, for many of us around the world, at least in the Northern Hemisphere, we may not always get to see fireflies. This presentation we're doing today is done in association with World Firefly Day. And you may be aware that World Firefly Day takes place in the summertime. It takes place on the first weekend of July every year. And so you're probably wondering why we're gathering together here in October to talk about fireflies. Well, the truth is that World Firefly Day has a number of events, and they're often very regional events because we're trying to encourage people to actually get outside and see fireflies. And so it was decided that this kind of forum, where we would take time sitting in front of computer screens and sharing with each other about fireflies, is better done at a time it wouldn't compete with the wonderful experiences we all have over the summer, doing our research, doing our enjoyment out, appreciating fireflies, again, especially for those of us in the Northern Hemisphere, where especially me in Massachusetts, where I'm based, Massachusetts in the United States, we have fireflies out for just a couple precious months, a few precious months from June to the beginning of August. So I certainly appreciate the chance now, when I don't get to go out and see them in my backyard behind me anymore, to be able to hear such a wonderful range of presentations, and particularly on such an important topic. And that's the other thing that I want to introduce and remind you of, is that we're really focused this morning on sharing space with fireflies, the way in which we as a society and we as individuals can find new and better ways to live together with fireflies. Fireflies International Network has as its mission to catalyze the conservation of fireflies and their habitats through research, and you'll be hearing about some of that, through education and through advocacy. And so I hope that this particular set of presentations you're going to hear this morning really helps you. I will be rejoining as a panelist at the end of this, and really look forward to what I hope is a rich conversation about the ways that we can live with fireflies in a productive way. And I do also want to apologize for the audio issues we had earlier on. In some ways it's appropriate. We're talking about insects where audio is not a very big part of their lives, right? We're talking about insects that are focused on bioluminescent displays, but hopefully all of our presenters you'll be able to hear very well, and we'll be able to engage in a wonderful discussion. So without further ado, I'll turn it back over to our moderator.
Thank you so much, Dr. Christopher Cressley, for the insightful speech just now. To continue our forum's agenda, I would like to invite Dr. Raphael J. Cook to give a keynote speech, and also to be our moderator of our forums today. Before I pass the floor to Dr. Raphael, again, let me introduce Dr. Raphael. Dr. Raphael J. Cook graduated from the University of Antwerp, UA, as a biologist in 1997. He finished his PhD in science biology in 2004. His doctoral research deals with the adaptive value of bioluminescence behavior in firefly Coleoptera lampridae. In the meanwhile, he is an artist, musician, and singer, mainly in the world music scenes. He still works as a volunteer researcher on this fascinating insect group. He does this as an associate researcher at the UA, either independently or as a collaborator in local and international projects, expedition in China, United States of America, Spain, France, Italy, help in setting up and joining conferences about fireflies. And he acts as a specialist advisor. As such, he is in Firefly International Network Steering Committee member 2022 to 2025 and the IUCN Firefly Specialist Group for European region. Without further ado, Dr. Raphael, the floor is yours.
Hello, everybody. Good morning to the people in South, Central, and North America. Good afternoon to the Europeans. Good evening to the people watching us from Asia, and good midnight from who is watching us from Australia. So I have the honor to open the Firefly Forum 2, sharing space with fireflies. And just to introduce a bit more the topic, I will first give a short introduction. So I guess most of us as children, we mesmerized about fireflies, glowworms. We have many beautiful memories probably of seeing them, but lately, increasingly, we see that they are getting away. Their habitat is getting lost. Light pollution, pesticides, hard surfaces, all work against them. So how to share our space with them, how to introduce them again more into our lives, that is the big topic of today. There was a new urban agenda endorsed by the United Nations in 2016, which aimed to provide modern cities to be better planned and better managed to encourage urban green areas for biodiversity. So it's in this sense that we are trying to talk about fireflies, to have local communities and also us to play a role in recognizing and looking after fireflies, their habitats, and other local wildlife as well. Okay, so I have the honor to first introduce our keynote speaker, which is Dr. Sergio Enriquez, who is involved in invertebrate conservation coordinator of the Global Center for Species Survival. He has experience of more than 20 years, especially in the conservation of arachnids. He's engaged in a global network of experts, including zoos, natural history museums, the IUCN specialist groups, and the Invertebrate Conservation Committee. He's co-chair of the Spider and Scorpion Specialist Group, and his research focused especially on taxonomy of lost species, on standardized monitoring protocols, and global metrics of biodiversity decline. He will talk about insect decline in Anthropocene and how fireflies fit the international roadmap for insect conservation and recovery. Please, Dr. Sergio Enriquez, the word is yours.
Thank you, Raphael. Thank you, everyone, for joining this morning. So thank you, Raphael. He already shared the title, so I won't add anything more. What I will mention is that Raphael mentioned local action, and I will try to give to the talk is a global perspective on how to escalate and how to be strategic about these local actions. I agree they have to be local, and this is just my global perspective on that issue. So I'll talk about the anthropogenic stressors, and there's a subtle but sometimes important difference between what is a stressor and what's a threat. And some people have issues around the red listing or assessment of extinction risk around that. So I'll talk briefly about it. And then I'll talk about the roadmap for insect conservation and recovery, a process that involved, of course, firefly specialists, arachnid specialists, beetle experts. It involved a lot of invertebrate specialists from around the world. And then I'll mention specifically how it applies to fireflies, or how I think personally it applies to fireflies, and what's my personal role in that as invertebrate coordinator, as Rafael mentioned, and of course the IUCN more generally. So here we go. It should be short, but let me know if you have questions in the chat and I'll try to address them later. So one of the things that I was asked to address is the human-wildlife coexistence or conflict side of things. So there is a specialist group within the IUCN that deals exclusively with human-wildlife conflict and coexistence. And they describe, as experts in the field, that human-wildlife conflict is when animals pose a direct and a recurrent threat to the livelihoods or the safety of people. And that, of course, leads to the persecution of that animal species or plant species, and there's just conflict that's about what should be done. In the case of fireflies, I wouldn't say there is a conflict with humans, because fireflies never cause, to the best of my knowledge, a direct threat to the livelihoods or people. They don't eat crops, they don't, of course, attack or eat people, as you all know, so there is never any conflict with them. What there do exist is challenges for coexistence, where the interests of people clash with the interests or habitat requirements of fireflies. And that's mostly in that framework that people speak about fireflies. So the issue of this lack of coexistence is that for the past 4.6 billion years, there's been a number of geological eras that geologists, paleontologists have mapped. And fairly recently, there's been so many changes into the ecosystem, and of course, the cycle of carbon, and that it has left a mark geologically. And so that's what the experts thought. And of course, many of these geological strata have names, and the most recent layer, the one we fit in, has been named the Anthropocene. That's because we think that if future archaeologists from another planet, or even from this one, were to find our records, we have left a mark on this planet that isn't necessarily a positive one. But yeah, just to kind of frame what the Anthropocene is as a geological period. What in fact it does mean for the perspective of environmentalists and conservationists is that our footprint on the planet is one that leaves the planet poorer, and of course leaves us poorer, and actually endangers our own life. And government agencies have realized this, I hope, or I believe, and there's, like Rafael mentioned, there's a few initiatives, a few conversations and even legislation made around this to prevent this and help us going forward. The insects have been a recent addition to this discussion, but it has been an important one. So even though maybe you've known already, several books were written on what they call the insect crisis, the insect ecological Armageddon. People have shrunken into Insectageddon, but it has made the cover of some of the biggest scientific and just normal magazines like the New York Times. There's a few books here. The Guardian made the cover. It was the cover of the Proceedings of National Academy of Sciences in the US. It was the cover of National Geographic and so on. So it's a topic that's been discussed heavily. And I'll just talk about how the Anthropocene or anthropogenic stressors fit that. So this is a publication that I wasn't a part of. This is by Wagner et al. In 2021, and it's Death by 1,000 Cuts and the Global Threats to Insects. I'll just highlight a few of the main ones. You will notice that on your screen to your left, there's a light bulb, and it indicates in pollution, and it indicates light pollution. So there's chemical pollution, light pollution, and sound. I highlighted light because fireflies are, of course, particularly sensitive to this kind of stressor, light pollution, which is increasing. You'll also notice on the left side of your screen, there's a spray, and I highlighted that for insecticides. So the modern industrialized agriculture has increased reliance on insecticidal or chemicals, and that, of course, impacts firefly larvae often as they go into the watershed, but also adults. And if you look to your right, one of the issues that we now know has impacted fireflies, for example, in the Mediterranean, is droughts, especially the kind of droughts that goes into mega droughts or aridification or desertification. So not really sporadic droughts, which I think diminish the issue, but continued, persistent, and ever increasing impacts of just lack of water, which again, firefly larvae heavily depend on. And one of the others I want to highlight is deforestation, which links directly to habitat loss in the mangroves, for example, of Southeast Asia. That's a known example. There are many other threats, but I wanted just to highlight the idea that insects have a number, and Raphael mentioned this as well, there's a number of anthropogenic stressors simultaneously. This is what the authors call death by 1,000 cuts, because all of them sound relatively small, but when act in unison, simultaneously, regularly, with no break, the populations have been declining steadily. The paper that I was a part of was Harvey et al. 2020. This was one of the precursors of this movement. And I'll just I know it's a bit confusing in a slide, so I'll go gently through it very briefly so you have an idea of what the strategy is. So basically the roadmap for conservation divides itself in these 4 parts or 6 points, but let's begin with the first one, which is immediate action. What should scientists and people do? That's step 1, and it says no regret solutions. And one of them is increased landscape heterogeneity in agriculture. We need to produce food, and we need to sustain an ever-grow population, but we need to do it with heterogeneity so that animals like fireflies can thrive. We need to reduce light pollution. That's a big chemical here. We need to reduce pesticide pollution. We need to reduce the imports of harmful projects. That includes, let's say, invasive species, for example, and reduce the way we work with the global network of supply chain. And this, of course, I mentioned alien species have been a threat for other species. There is now alien fireflies being brought from South America to Europe. So that can pose an issue to native fireflies, yet to be understood. We need to conserve and preserve species we assess as threatened. This is a priority for many groups, including fireflies, I think. And then we need to enhance restoration and conservation programs. This is actually where my work emphasizes more, and I'll talk about it in the end a little. And something that all we're doing here today is raise awareness for citizen science and capacity building. And that's the last point in this cycle. Just talk to people, involve communities, and many of those here today do that. Moving forward from that point 1, the point 2 is to perform large-scale assessment or extinction risk assessments. And this is, as one of the tools, the red list. This is what myself, Raphael, Sony, and many others have been doing, try to assess the extinction risk of fireflies globally with certain priorities, but do it at the largest scale. And this, I remind you, is an immediate action and a no-regret solution, as we call it. So something we should always be doing continuously, regarding of anything else. I'll just mention briefly the others. I don't want to take too much time. If you see the midterm actions to your right, there's importance about new research, and mostly about disentangling these anthropogenic stressors. As I mentioned before, there was a paper afterwards saying that there were 1,000 cuts, right? It's important to see which ones of these impact fireflies the most, so we can address them. Drought would be one, light would be another. They often act in unison or they act simultaneously. It's important to see which ones is impacting them more, at which life stage. An example here is that drought might impact larvae more, light might impact the adult communication more in the case of fireflies. So it's important to try and understand them both and act on both simultaneously. The 4th point is the importance of museums and insect collections. There's a lot of lack of data on distribution, how animals have or not declined over time. So it's very important to, in the midterm action, invest in these collections and invest in supporting the collections we have, but gather more data. Ideally, I would argue, from my biased point of view, to sample with a goal or the objective to measure conservation trends. So rather than just collect or add to collection value, target conservation measure or the impact of conservation measures. Namely, if you restore a mangrove, it's important to see what happened after restoration. Did it work? Did it increase firefly numbers and presence, as an example? And last one was this long-term action, and that's partnership is part of what we do here, and of course global monitoring programs, and that's something that actually the Firefly Specialist Group has been trying to do, is have a guideline to how to monitor fireflies globally in a standard way that can be comparable, and working with partnerships like Xerxes in the US, for example, and of course like we are here with the Malaysian Nature Society. So the way the IUCN works, which is the last part of my talk, is the framework usually goes into this triangle of action, which is assess, plan, act. So first you assess the risk, you produce a plan of how to tackle those threats, and you do something about it. It's important that the cycle is complete, because if you do nothing about it, everything else was pointless and the entire cycle falls through. It's important then to assess again, to understand if what we did works, but the cycle is basically this. It's also important to communicate our findings so people know, and we don't commit won't do the same errors again. And it's important to network and work together rather than in silos. It's very important to be part of a community rather than be working alone in isolation. One of the small examples of this is what Xerxes did, is I think was Candace Owen's work in part. This is for Xerxes and is how to make lights Firefly friendly. So this is an example of where the threat was understood or is fairly well understood. Light causes an issue for fireflies. Then the plan could be, in theory, how can we produce documents that share this information with people, because we hope they want to reduce firefly mortality. They like fireflies. Most people, everyone, I would say, like fireflies. And the action stage is how can we escalate this to the point that this is done at an international scale or at least a regional scale. The idea is to try and escalate these kind of approaches. So that's exactly what the Global Center does. That's the Global Center for Species Survival, where I work. The Global Center has this approach where we have a director and then we have taxonomic experts. I am, of course, the invertebrate coordinator, but we have a plant and fungi, a bird coordinator, a mammal, freshwater, and so on. You can see it on the screen. The reason I mention this specifically is when you look at fireflies and the threat by light, you could think or you could imagine that you want to tackle this alone. But in fact, lights threaten birds, migrating birds, and it threatens bats. And of course, it threatens moths and other inverts as well. But it's not just a problem for fireflies. And the point of a center is that even though I support, of course, the invertebrates, it's fairly easy for me, and it's part of my work, to work with Justin in this case, to see what are the bat experts doing to prevent light threats. What are the birds doing? And I'll talk to Samuel. In this case, Julia has worked with the Lights Off project here in the US. And the idea is that together we have a stronger case and we have more people. We definitely have more impact in these decision makers. Can we change light pollution numbers and light pollution impact throughout bigger regions? And I think together we usually can get more things done than alone. We also have Laura Perry, that's in the bottom right of your screen, and she's a behavioral change coordinator. And she's perhaps someone that's more useful to work with at a family level. So we can change, let's say, policy at a state level or work with official state buildings, but she will be the one to talk about how to change behavior in people, in their households, one by one. That's her job. But anyway, just to try to highlight why I'm here or how this connects to one of the many, of course, threats of fireflies. And lastly, I know I probably exceeded my time. I just wanted to thank you all for the invitation and to pass it on to Raphael for the next speaker. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you so much, Sergio. It was a very interesting talk. And we move on because we are indeed out of time or over our time to one of the points that Sergio mentioned, which was light pollution. So I invite Mira van den Broek, who is doing her PhD at the Evolutionary Ecology Group, University of Antwerp in Belgium. She's been studying the effects of artificial light on the behavior of the European common glowworm, Lampyris noctiluca. So she knows everything about the effects of light pollution on the species. Her talk is The Need for a Dark Sky, How Artificial Light Outshines Fireflies. There you go, Mira.
Well, thanks, Sergio and Rafael, to introduce indeed the next topic I'm going to talk about, which is indeed the need for a dark sky and how artificial light outshines fireflies. So artificial light brightening up our nights is a fairly new but omnipresent part of our modern society. And these kind of images are probably well known to all of you. And from this, it is already clear that these changes of natural nights cannot go without consequences on the living things on our planet. The visible lights from space are the result of the accumulation of a variety of light sources, such as street lights, traffic lights, and billboards, residence illuminations and outdoor lighting, lights from the industry and agriculture, such as these greenhouses, and from sky glow. What exactly is sky glow? Sky glow is a result of an upward directed spill light that is scattered by dust and gas molecules in the atmosphere, which results in a hazy light dome above the cities. And on cloudy nights, this effect is strongly amplified and covers vast areas, including more natural areas and nearby forests, as we can see on this picture. So in this picture, it was a night without moon. So this is all sky glow you can see from a nearby city. And nocturnal species using light signals to communicate, such as the Lampyridae, are especially vulnerable to interfering artificial light from the environment, like Sergio already mentioned. And indeed, the evidence of negative effects of ALAN on fireflies is accumulating. ALAN can not only heavily disrupt bioluminescence-based mating systems, but also other aspects of firefly biology. These aspects are the less studied aposematic bioluminescence, prey-predator interactions, larval foraging behavior, and larval development. Among the glowing fireflies, it's the European common glowworm, Lampyris noctiluca, that has been frequently used as a model species to study the impacts of ALAN on the mating system due to its wide distribution, relatively high abundance, and ease to find on the European continent. And in this species, the flightless females use a continuous glow to attract the non-bioluminescent but flying males. And repeatedly, studies have found that males were less attracted to imitation females when these were lit by white LED light, and they also found a dose-dependent effect. And from a female point of view, studies found that females in the field glowed for more nights when illuminated by orange low-pressure sodium streetlights, indicating that they had a delayed mating, or in the worst case, did not manage to mate at all. And in the lab, they found that females glowed for shorter time per night when illuminated by white LED light. In the roving flashing firefly species, flying males emit light flashes to which receptive females will answer with response flashes. And the effects of light pollution on courtship flashing displays of many species have been studied, with many species from the Photinus genus. And from all these studies, only Photinus spiralis and marginalis did not show any lowered mating success induced by artificial light in the field. And in all the other studies, artificial light at night negatively impacted mating by reducing flash rates, and in some cases, males were less likely to approach artificially lit females, and in other cases, mating was less successful or even prevented under artificial light. In stationary synchronous fireflies, males perch on leaves and collectively signal by flashing together in tight synchrony. Only 2 studies have been done, and the first one found that ALAN in the field did not prevent Pteroptyx males to congregate. But the second one found that males in the lab flash less often and with less synchrony in response to camera flashes, which can be problematic as these species are often the stars of popular tourist attractions. Fireflies don't only use bioluminescence for reproduction, but also as an aposematic signal, and some also to lure prey species to predate on them. And Owens found that the alarm flashes of Aquatica ficta fireflies were produced at a lower rate and became brighter and longer under short to mid-wavelength artificial light. And another study found a lowered flashing rate in both prey and predator species, but did not observe any predation in both lit and unlit conditions. So more studies should be done to study the real impacts of ALAN on predation. Aquatica ficta larvae were reared under dim ALAN for 2 weeks to study the effects of ALAN on larval development. And they observed a high mortality both immediately following and several months after the exposure. And larval movement and dispersion also seemed to be influenced by ALAN. Foraging Lamprigera larvae were found to avoid lit areas. Photurus larvae exposed to ALAN showed negative phototaxis from the light source. And Murphy and Moise found that Photurus larvae were more immobile under lit conditions. And also glowworm larvae were found to glow less and forage less under bright nights due to full moon or due to bright sky glow on cloudy nights. Another aspect of ALAN to keep in mind is the shift in day-night cycle induced by light pollution. Artificial light exposure late in the day or in summer may prolong daily activity and seasonal activity, while artificial light exposure early in the day or in spring may advance activity. This means that the timing of pupation, hatching, mating, oviposition, dormancy, etc. could be disrupted. This does furthermore not only apply to fireflies, but also to non-bioluminescent and non-nocturnal species. So further research to get a better picture of how exactly ALAN affects the Lampyridae is needed to better manage the conservation efforts for these beetles. However, we already know enough to act now. So the most effective, however controversial, conservation measure would be to simply turn off the lights that are close or in Lampyridae habitat, and especially during the mating period. If this is not possible due to safety priorities, shielding streetlights could already reduce spill light into natural habitats and reduce sky glow, as we already saw in the Xerces document. Smart streetlights using motion sensors could also help to reduce light pollution. And so if you'd like to know more about the topic, I'd recommend you to read the new review paper about the behavioral responses of bioluminescent fireflies to artificial light at night. And finally, to conclude, for millions of years, fireflies have lit up our night skies, but they could be silenced by our artificial lights in just about a century or so. So hopefully we can prevent this from happening. So I want to thank you for your attention, and I'm looking forward to discuss this further later on. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Mira. That was a very good talk. And now we know how light pollution is affecting fireflies. I will now introduce the next speaker, which is Dr. Anchana Thancharoen, who is an instructor at the Department of Entomology at the Kasetsart University in Thailand. She has successfully reared several Thai firefly species, including aquatic species, and she has tried to conserve the fireflies through reintroduction processes. She is the Southeast Asia co-chair of the YUCN Firefly Specialist Group and a Fireflyers International Network Steering Committee member. Anchana, she will bring us the topic about how businesses are using fireflies, because fireflies, they use lights not only to be visible between each other, but they don't only attract each other's attention, but they also attract human attention. So she will talk the title of her talk is Sharing Space with Fireflies, a Green Business Idea in Thailand. Welcome, Anchana.
Thank you, Raphael. Maybe I gave you introduction of my presentation first, and I starting from just biologist. I try to rear my species, and when I do it successful, so I want to do something next, and I need to say thank you to Dr. Wu, who I visit to learn how to do firefly restoration from Taiwan, and now we can have it in Thailand. Okay, let's go. Hello everyone who love fireflies. I'm Anchana Thancharoen from Thailand. It's not only us fall in love with the fascinating lives of fireflies. Because of that, the fireflies have become more important than ever, especially in business. So my talk is about sharing space with fireflies, a green business idea in Thailand. It does not happen firstly in Thailand. You might hear about this project in Taiwan, where I have learned from. Thank you, Dr. Wu, for sharing knowledge. And now we have it in Thailand. Sclerotia aquatilis is an aquatic firefly locally in Thailand. The larvae live in the water and feed on aquatic snails. They have no gill like some common aquatic fireflies in Japan, China, and Taiwan. This species that breathe through the spiracle at the end of abdomen. They have a back swimming behavior. You can see the light. They can grow from the light organ here at night time. There are two sites that I'm working on aquatic species. The first place is Chiwa Panavet Learning Center is in Toyota plant, and another is Hinghoi Harmony. It's kind of cafe and restaurant. These two places is not so far from Bangkok. Both projects have done quite similar process. We have surveyed the local population in the project area and nearby area to understand the current situation of fireflies. We can find the pairs for collecting the parent population of fireflies that can support the mass rearing process. And then habitat design and construction and gardening happen later, and the nature need time to stabilize. From my project, I understand that the nature need 1.5 to 2 years to be the good habitat for fireflies, and during this time fireflies and their food snail will increase the number in laboratory. When the habitat ready, the firefly larvae and the snail also released into the pond. From my project, I also release 5 female adults because we have so many female, and we want to release too. And the pond, and the next step is monitoring is important step because we need to evaluate the project success. Here is Chiwa Panavet Learning Center. We construct the small pond inside the forest, and there's more than 3 years. It's become perfect habitat for fireflies like this, and now we can watch fireflies every day from this pond, but the population is not so many because it's just small pond. And this the second place, Hinghoi Harmony. We have it's not a big pond, and we have some mangrove tree inside the pond too, because there are 2 species of fireflies inhabit in this area. And at the first time, we have a problem of pond cannot keep the water, like just like pump the water in and no water if in every week, and so it's not good for fireflies, aquatic fireflies. But after 3 months we can have water like this, but the plant is not look so beautiful. They need time, and after is the perfect time, like 1.5 years after this. We also face many problems in the pond. In summer, algal bloom happen in this pond, and it's not good for water quality, and also it's not beautiful. The shop is not like this. And here duckweed is exotic plant. We try to eliminate all exotic plant and animal, but sometimes it's so hard. For this case, duckweed come with the turtle and lizard, water lizards. they try to find home. I understand maybe our pond is good home for them, and so just move from another way to another pond and move back, something like this. And so duckweed, we can have duckweed, and now we also have duckweed, and just natural selection, so we should have it. And for this plant, on the light side, we grow this plant, but the plant is go so fast and is overgrown finally, and we just keep it for supporting firefly larvae, but just limiting area, keep it just small part. It's not small, just keep it in some part of the pond, and many problems need to solve. I have to deal with the company or the shop to solve the light pollution problem. They understand Firefly don't like the light pollution, but they also need the beautiful building. So we have to make them understand more and try to help them to protect the light from the building, shine to the pond area. And finally, they care Firefly more than their construction. The light from outside is also the problem. They choose the net here for climbing plant and to make the wall like a wall to protect the light from the outside area. And because of the area is on the riverbank, we also face with the high salinity of water that come from the river. It's not from flooding, but it's from pumping. The staff need to measure water salinity of the water in the river before pump into the pond. But they think maybe it's not important, just do it, or maybe forget, something like that. And finally, we have high salinity water in the pond, and this is the effect. The plant, many plants die or become ugly like this, and so now they understand they need to measure salinity of water every time. And flooding is also the problem, is important problem. And now the pond is also flooding because for this year we have many storm hit Thailand, and so many time of flooding happen. And after flooding, we lost many big trees, and this is the Sonalatia cassiolaris, but we don't understand why they die. So just need to grow the new one. And besides the taking care of firefly habitat, the company staff have to join in releasing step. This step they love so much, and they want the customer join in this step too, because they might love fireflies at the first sight, and they love it, and everyone love it, and want to share it. And so this come to World Firefly Day event this year, and many people join in the event and have a chance to release the firefly larvae and also adult. Finally, the green business can attract customer and can transfer knowledge, and also can raise awareness of nature conservation to people. And thank you.
ห้อยมาเก็บเอาไว้ใต้หมอน นอนคืนนั้นจะฝันดี จะฝันเห็นดวงดาวมากมาย ฝันเห็นเจ้าชายเจ้าหญิงฝันแสนสวยงาม เด็กน้อยนั่งตักคุณยายไต่ถามความจริง ยายยิ้มกินหมากหนึ่งคำไม่ตอบอะไรสายหูใจเด็กน้อยอยากเห็นจริง อยากเห็นดวงดาวมากมาย อยากเห็นเจ้าชายเจ้าหญิงอยากฝันสวยงามหิ่งห้อยนับร้อยนับพันส่องแสงระยิบระยับกัน สว่างไสวไปทั้งต้นลำพูเด็กน้อยแอบออกมาไล่คว้าแสงน้อยมาดู ใส่ไว้ในกล่องงามหรูซ่อนไว้ใต้หมอนแล้วนอนคอยฝันดีพอได้ลืมตามองเห็นคุณยายมาแกล้งถามว่าเจออะไรสนุกแค่ไหนที่ฝันใจเด็กน้อยจึงทบทวนไม่ฝันเห็นอะไรมากมายรีบค้นเร็วไวใต้หมอนเปิดฝานั้นดูหิ่งห้อยในกล่องตอนนี้เหมือนนอนตัวหนึ่งไม่สวยดังซึ่งตอนอยู่ใต้ต้นลำพูส่องแสงยายจึงยิ้มและสอนตามจะมองเห็นความงามที่จริงอยากขังความจริงไม่เห็นอยากขังความงามหิ่งห้อยนับร้อยนับพันส่องแสงระยิบระยับกันสว่างไสวไปทั้งต้นลำพูเด็กน้อยถือกล่องออกมาเปิดฝาแล้วแง้มมองดูนอนน้อยในกล่องงามหรูก็เปล่งแสงสุขใสบินไปรวมกันเด็กน้อยนอนหลับสบายอมยิ้มละไมใต้หมอนไม่มีกล่องอะไรไม่มีสิ่งใดๆถูกขังนอนคืนนั้นจึงฝันดีฝันเห็นดวงดาวมากมายฝันเห็นเจ้าชายเจ้าหญิงฝันแสนสวยงาม
Thank you, Anchana. So nice that you show us an example how local initiatives are done to share space with fireflies, but it also shows that it's quite difficult. And but what I like a lot is that also the customers are involved. Next, I will invite Ishwari Giovanni Gutierrez Carranza, who studied biology at the Faculty of Sciences at the UNAM in Mexico. He's currently working with Dr. Zaragoza Caballero at the National Collection of Insects of the Institute of Biology at the UNAM. He also collaborates with the Fireflies International Network and the YUCN Firefly Specialist Group. He's the founder of the Mexico Firefly Festival and also coordinator of the Fireflies of Mexico iNaturalist project. He was awarded the Recognition of Environmental Merit of the State of Mexico, granted by the Ministry of Environment by the State of Mexico. He has described a new genus of fireflies, Arphallus, and he has described 7 new species to science. Ishwari will bring us a very short presentation on the urban landscapes for fireflies in Mexico City, the Tlalpan forests. Here you go, Ishwari. I welcome you.
Thank you, Raphael. Okay. Can you see my presentation now? Okay.
Yes.
Well, basically, we worked at Mexico City, which it's the capital from our country. It has 25 protected natural areas, and the Tlalpan Forest, in fact, was our study area this year. It's basically a pine and oak forest, but as you can see in this picture from Google Earth, there's nothing but city all around this protected area. This photo, for example, was taken from inside the natural area. It seems to be taken at dawn or perhaps at dusk, close to night. But actually, this photo was taken at about 2 a.m. in the morning. This is basically Ellen, the artificial light at night at all its expression. With the growing interest in fireflies from our country, the administration of Tlalpan Forest contacted us to conduct a study about the fireflies that were sighted there. I must say, and this is important, this was basically the first project on fireflies financed directly by a government institution in our country. At the beginning, of course, they didn't know which species it was there. And the only information we had was the places where fireflies were sighted. Now, after some intensive field work between April and August this year, and of course, lots of lab research at our university, which in fact has, thanks to Professor Zaragoza Caballero, this is the most important collection of fireflies from our country. Finally, we found 4 species of fireflies. Here marked in the blue area. First, we found the Photinus extensus firefly, which is in fact one of the largest fireflies of the Valley of Mexico. Here in the purple zone, we found Photuris lugubris, also there inside the Tlalpan forest. In this small marked side with black, we found also Photinus corusca, but this is a firefly without light, a diurnal firefly. And finally, our most significant finding was in this red area, which was Photinus palasiosi, which is in fact the same species that is located in the sanctuary in Tlaxcala, Nanacamilpa, the most famous sanctuary in Mexico. Basically, before our study, this species was believed to be endemic only to that site in Tlaxcala. Now it's not endemic only to that zone, maybe to the Valley of Mexico. Before this study, in fact, there were 15 species of fireflies registered in Mexico City, but with Palasiosi now there are 16 species. And basically, the Tlalpan forest now, it's home to 25% of the fireflies species registered in Mexico City. And in addition to this investigation, for those who already know the Mexican Firefly Festival, like for example, Mr. Raphael, who participated last year, Due to the pandemics, last year was entirely online, of course, but this year we have the fortune to perform outdoor activities, like, for example, small talks for the cloud and forest visitors, some painting and making a firefly for children, also an insect exhibition for the visitors. This is how we lived the Firefly Day back in July this year. And also we performed a citizen involvement initiative that in fact it was proposed by Sarah Lopez and Mireya Gonzalez, also members of Lab Zaragoza, of naming a new species of firefly. This was found in close to Tlalpan Forest, not directly there, but it's also from Mexico City. With this species now, there are 17 species registered for Mexico City. Well, anyway, the theme of this dynamic was illustrious Mexican women. So the public in general proposed their names through our website. No matter which branch, they proposed writers, actresses, biologists. But finally, Julieta Fierro, which is a Mexican astrophysicist, is the one who won the name for this firefly. This one, it's Piropiga, also without light, but it's a cool species. Now, well, this is was just a brief slideshow. Of course, I would like to thank all the members of Lab Zaragoza and our friends who helped us to perform this year's festival, the administration, the government of Mexico City, and of course the Fireflyers for this small space. Thank you all.
Thank you very much, Ishwari. This was interesting that in Mexico City you have that many firefly species. I wish it were true for my country. Now we'll continue with the next speaker, which is Dr. Wu Chia-Xiong, who is a general director of the Tree Garden Company and chairman of Taiwan Ecology and Arboriculture Society. He's also the adjunct associate professor in Huafan University and a member of the YUCN Firefly Specialist Group. Dr. Wu will talk about finding fireflies back in business way in Taiwan.
Thank you, Raphael. Okay, on to that, I want to have a smooth talk, so I will close my video and just keep my sound. So the first slide shows that now in Taiwan, the public believes that we can find or restore the firefly back in the artificial way. But how did I do in the business? That's my presentation. Oh, wait. Okay, so I want to talk about the business model of the fireflies restoration. What is the business model? The business model means that it's a process to earn the money, and the firefly restoration project including 7 processes in one project. First, you have to see that possible place, is that place or habitat are suitable or not for the firefly restoration. It's the first step. Then you need to do, if it's not a good habitat, then you have to construct or modify it. After that, you have to accompany to really many firefly larvae. Then you have to organize and host a firefly release event for the public. Then after you release, you have to monitoring the larvae. And after the adult appear, then you have to organize and host a big firefly watching event. And after that, the habitat always need habitat. You have to sell your consumer or to training your consumer how to keep or modify the firefly habitat. So for me now, that's the while Firefly restoration engineering is a business that based on the construction and by using the ecology science and the civic science and find the Firefly back with the marketing and the public relation way. So that talk about that the first step. Is any step that is a step that is suitable for the Firefly restoration. This slide shows that I talked about it in the United States in the year 2014. That for me now, artificial Firefly restoration is not a ticket or the money for the bad engineering, for the bad civic engineering. And for me, that's for my consumer, that they always talk. They always ask me a question, and they say that somebody says that he or she live in some place for 10 to 6 years, and during his or her whole life, they never see the firefly around their home. So they will think that it's weird or ridiculous or nonsense to restoration firefly back in that place. But I will using another evidence to show that I have my reason, or I have good reason to file the firefly back. That using okay, combine the ancient map and the modern Google map by using a free website here. My famous workout that is that I find a firefly back in the Taipei city, and this is the Dan Forest Park on the Google map, and it's the street map, and we can see that it's the park that's in the middle town, and around it are all building. But I using this ancient map that published in the year 1904, and that ancient map shows that during about 100 years ago, this park before 100 years were all water rice fields. And in the East Asia or in Taiwan, that's the water rice field is a natural habitat for the aquatic firefly. And the second question that I ever meet is that there are many people that says if a firefly, if we find a firefly back and it succeeds, if the firefly out of control, is there that negative effect or damage to the other animal? But for me, that if we want to find a firefly back, it's expensive and hard, but it's very easy to destroy the firefly habitat just by machine. So for me or for the public, in fact, it's a controllable project now. And the second step is that we have to modify or construct a new firefly habitat. And in fact, now in Taiwan, the term firefly, it means 2 family and 61 species now. And 52 Lamprey firefly species could not find them back by their artificial way onto the small population or still are known for their food or too hard or too expensive to find them back. For example, the winter firefly. So there are just only 4 species that we can find them back in artificial way. 2 are the aquatic insect, aquatic firefly. Another 2 are terrestrial over the land firefly. And now the Achena that showed her great work out for the aquatic firefly. And the key for the aquatic firefly restoration is that to keep the stable between the in that water land interface. The interface between the water and the land is most important for the firefly larvae. And for the land firefly, one species that Abscondita serrata, their larvae hatch in the under the forest, and another one is the Pyrocolia analis, and their larvae were hatched in the organic vegetable field. So in the larvae mystery, the most key issue for me that is how to control their sick, and it's sick aquatic larvae that are real, and there was something that strange on her body, and I have to check and to find a reference. Finally, I know that it's very common parasite for the shrimp. So I use the shrimp medicine to cure the aquatic firefly. And the first step is organize and host the firefly larvae event. For me now, that is it's a picture that my consumer, these people, is my consumer, that let them to take a picture with the kit, then release the firefly. Is the best picture for my consumer, and they will always want to their firefly larvae release event could be published on the newspaper. And in the first day, we have to monitoring the firefly larvae, and for the volunteer or the non-ecology researcher, that we have to train in the relative abundance way. But if we using the absolute rate abundant monitoring way, it's very hard for the non-ecological volunteer. So I have to do it by myself. And the final step is that we have to keep or maintain the firefly habitat, and including we have to monitoring biota, clean the pond, or tree or plant pruning, remove the extra light, and remove the invasive alien species. And during the adult season, we have to do the light control. So it's some picture that we do the pond keep by volunteer or by the students. Okay, so how do I sell or promote this firefly restoration project? For me now, for the being a consumer is for a small construction company. They have money, but they just earn maybe a firefly restoration bid from the government. So they have to hire me to be the consultant to teach them how to do the firefly habitat. And for some community or farm or school, they have willing, they have people, but they don't have many money. So I have to organize or host a workshop to teach them how to find a firefly bag in the relative less money way, and but in the relative long time. And finally, if my consumer, they are richer, but they want to see Firefly back just within 1 year, then I will suggest you have to buy my package proposal. And for me, now there are some click company or even the government in the Taiwan. So that's my some project that for VIS. VIS is the number 8 clip company in the world. He buy me my while project for me to do the Firefly restoration, modify their habitat, release Firefly larvae, and they cost this number, and my average gross margin is about 32 to 35%. That's the way how I earn my life in Taiwan now. Another case is that also the number 1 clip company, TSMC in Taiwan. I also do the similar things for them. And it's my biggest consumer, biggest market. And for my biggest consumer, to find the Firefly back or do the Firefly restoration job is their CSR and the ESG job. So that's all my presentation. Thank you.
Thanks a lot, Dr. Wu.
Okay.
I'm going to introduce the next speaker, which is Dr. Jose Ramon Guzman Alvarez. He's a Spanish naturalist. He was the former part of the former steering committee member of the Firefly International Network. He founded a citizen science website in Spain. Have you seen a glowworm, or has visto una luciérnaga? He's also a member of the YUCN Firefly Specialist Group, and his question is simple. If we want to take more care about fireflies, we should know them better. Please, Ramon.
Thank you very much, Rafael, for the presentation. Thank you to Firefly International Network for the invitation to the forum. And good morning, good evening, good afternoon to everyone. It's amazing to share a global meeting like this and having the opportunity to share knowledge and experience about fireflies with all of us. Well, I live in Spain and we have fireflies, but very discreet and very shy fireflies in comparison with other species that you have told before. I mean that the performance of our fireflies are not spectacular. We can find 1, 2, 3 female glowing alone. So with this introduction, I like to point that every species of firefly have its different performance and way of growing, and so the way that we humans interact with the different species are different. But no matter how they bright, that fireflies as a group are a good symbol of, for my opinion, of our relationship with nature and how can we improve this relation for the present and for the future. And this is the focus of my presentation. We have started with a tale, and I invite you to finish also with a tale. That is the way that I have prepared the presentation. So I'm going to share the presentation. I hope it's going. Sorry, it's okay, please. Can you see it? Okay, let's go, no? Rafael, everything okay, no? Good. So we take more, yes. So we take more care of the fireflies if we know them better. A firefly's tale. Not long ago, on a pale blue planet in a not distant galaxy, the wisest of the wise gathered, because they were worried about the grandchildren of their grandchildren. Since they were so wise, their concern was very deep and great. And since they were very old, their concern was very long-lasting and reached very far away. We need us all to be more careful and loving with everything, they agreed. So they asked each other for their opinion to find out what they could do to achieve such an apparently simple thing. They argued for a long time, but they did not come to a conclusion. Then someone said, "We need something very simple to people understand how to take care of everything." "Yes, we need a symbol," said another. "Something that just by looking at it, you can understand everything," said a third. So they all started thinking at once. It should be beautiful. Beauty is captivating when it's pure, one proposed. It should be small. The tiny allows you to better appreciate the huge, contributed another. It should be delicate. This will remind us how fragile we are. The suggestion continued. It should be everywhere. Only then could everyone understand at the same time, reflected another voices. It should be sustainable, said another with an insecure tone. Sustainable? Most of the rest asked. Aren't you being a bit modern? Well, I just wanted to say that it doesn't work with electricity in case the power goes out, replied the insecure voice, a little embarrassed. The discussion continued. There were many other interventions, which were included in the minutes of the meeting by the secretary. When the secretary finished writing, he looked at everyone, waited a few seconds. Silence. Since no one said anything, the secretary asked, "And what now?" The bell rang. It was dinner time. The secretary closed the session, warning the audience that before they slept, they should have a good candidate of a symbol of taking care of everything in that pale blue planet. They left the conference hall and walked through the garden to the dining room. Suddenly, they saw a small light shining between some blades of grass. As if all they were shaken by a ray, the same impression came to all minds. Here it was what they needed. It was so beautiful, and so tiny, and so delicate, and certainly it was almost everywhere. And it was sustainable, concluded a less insecure voices. They had the dinner nervously, sharing their memories of Fireflies with each other. And when they returned to the conference room, the secretary could close the session with a big smile, asking the wises to go with their grandchildren that same night and show them the fireflies of their courtyards, their orchards, their fields, and their forests. And it is said that same night, one of them got on a boat and toured the mangroves with his granddaughter, getting surprised by the lighted trees. And another went into a forest of beautiful leaves with her grandson and were amazed by the twinkling of thousands of flying fairies. And another went with his niece's daughter and walked through the city garden and discovered luminous sparks dancing between the vases. And another wandered through olive groves with the grandson of a friend from the residence, searching a faint resplendence amongst the grass. They all working at night, fearless, plentiful with the wonders of nature. Each one witnessed a different performance of fireflies. Some contemplated an almost infinite swarm of light light, a crowd growing synchronously. Others barely saw one or two faint glows provenient from a sole individual perched on a grass stalk. The Wasis thought that not only the light of the fireflies was fascinating, the diversity with which they illuminated the world was astounding as well. Time went by. Those grandsons and granddaughter grew up, and they took over the granddad's commitment. Remind the inhabitants of that pale blue planet how much attention and care we all deserve. Because all we, whenever we are beautiful, small, and delicate. And not only we are we all. And those grandsons and granddaughters understood how important it is to preserve such a good symbol, and how necessary it is to continue walking at night with our grandsons and granddaughters to encounter these symbols, and how important is education awareness to help communities, decision makers, landowners, and everyone on conserving spaces suitable for fireflies, because they are so tiny, wonderful, fragile, and sustainable. And that the more we know about them, the better we take care of them, and of many others more, including ourselves. In fact, fireflies are not just fireflies. Fireflies are a beautiful and powerful symbol to take more and better care of everything. Thanks very much. Thanks very much to all. And that's all. Rafael, thank you.
Thank you very much, Ramon. I cannot more agree that fireflies are a good symbol, not only to conserve them or to share our place with them, but also to make a better planet again. I see that next on our program there will be a panel discussion. So there is also the possibility to ask questions, but first we would have this panel discussion between three specialists about various possible practices to shape our space with fireflies, but also with other wildlife and flora. I would like to invite Dr. Chris Kratzley, which has brought us the introduction. He's the chair of the Fireflies International Network Committee. I also invite Ishwari, that already talked about fireflies in Mexico City. And as a third expert panelist, I invite Kelly Reidenauer. She's a licensed professional landscape architect and a conservation ecologist. She's got an undergraduate degree in landscape architecture, practiced professionally for 6 years between NGOs and private practice before pursuing a master in science in integrative conservation and sustainability. This at the Odom School of Ecology at the University of Georgia in the United States. She created the Atlanta Firefly Project, and this for her thesis research, investigating how land management affects the local abundance of the Big Dipper firefly Photinus paralis. She's also a member of the Southeastern Firefly Working Group and Fireflies International Network. So I would like to invite Kelly, as she hasn't spoken yet, to maybe open this discussion. Please, Kelly.
Thanks for the introduction, Raphael. Good to see everyone. To start, it seems like there's already some questions in the chat. I'm not sure if you guys have anything you want to start, or if you just want to go straight to questions from the participants. Any preference there, Chris?
Well, I would jump in and suggest I do like that first question in the chat there. Could you share what are the challenges you are facing in working on Firefly conservation? And like Raphael suggested, I'm going to let you be the first respondent to that particular question, if that's okay.
Yeah. So, I mean, this question's going to be different for all of us, depending on where we are and, you know, what species we're talking about. Certainly some of the big challenges right now, especially where I am in the Southeast, is there is a big initiative to look at data deficiency in certain species that are a little bit more cryptic, not the ones that I share my backyard with, but we actually just don't have a lot of data about where they're located, how abundant they are, and so we can't really assess how well they're doing. So that's one of the big challenges that we're working on here in the Southeast in the US, is to really go out and do surveys and work with landowners to figure out where these species are. So that's a big challenge. And of course, we're concerned about light pollution, habitat loss, and other land management threats like pesticide use, potentially for water quality issues for these species of concern.
Thank you, Kelly. And I would echo that as well. I think that one of the challenges, you know, having worked on Firefly Watch now in the United States for 15 years or so, where we ask, it's a citizen science project. We ask the community to get involved. I think that it is really a challenge knowing what's there. You get reports on and you can see what is obvious, and what is, most likely the things that are least threatened are the ones that are going to be reported on, and often in a way that doesn't capture the really dwindling numbers that are there. People in the general public are going to respond to what they see, but what we really need help is finding the things that we're missing and that we know less about. And so I think and part of that challenge then means moving to other outreach, and I think there've been some great examples of this already. Other outreach besides just the, what for us in many cases, I think in our Firefly Watch type work is the local homeowner. How do we move beyond that to other people who manage and own large properties where there may be fireflies that can be found? So I would just add that.
Can I add something, Raphael?
Yes, I was just wanting to invite you to say something.
Yes, in fact, I would like to share two funny things that happened to us at the Tlalpan Forest, working directly there. First, besides all the light pollution that I showed on the picture, in fact, inside the protected area, there is an extensive grid of artificial light. The funny thing is that visitors can only be inside the area up until 5 p.m. After 5 p.m. there are no visitors. So basically there is no need to keep the lights on during night. During our assessment directly there, we of course suggested to turn off the lights inside the protected area. Of course, they argue a theme of security. I mean, Mexico, it's not like one of the safest city in the world, but I must say that, in fact, this area, the south of Mexico City, it's one of the areas with most economic incomes. I mean, they definitely don't have security issues around that area. So we managed to convince them to turn off the lights. And another funny thing that happened to us is that since around that area, politicians have their families there living around that area, and so one night that we were working there at night, they call law enforcement, like, hey, someone's inside there at the protected area. They thought there might be bad people around there, but in fact it was us, right, working. And they sent us, we explained to, of course, the police officers that we were working at this project. And so, but in fact, this is an example how new it is, this projects in this type of areas. Of course, besides the natural problems, there are also some social issues that we might have. But of course, our festival, all the talks and activities we performed, they helped us to make a citizen involvement in this area. Thank you.
There's a question about, can a firefly be a pollinator? At least, you know, the species here that are most common, they sometimes do nectar on flowers as adults. Here, you know, there's a lot we don't know about this actually, but here they're not a significant pollinator that we know of, you know, not like bees or wasps, for example, who do a lot of pollination. But they do nectar a bit. The Big Dipper does here on a few different flowers. So I don't know if you guys have experience with other pollination activities of fireflies, but here they nectar a bit, just not a huge, that we know of, pollinator. As in, the plant doesn't rely on that species primarily for its reproduction. Anyone else?
Thank you, Kelly. I don't know myself of species that are specialist pollinators. So if somebody knows something more about it, please tell us. There are still some more questions. So what could be the public or citizen contribute to conserve the firefly? So please.
I would certainly say getting involved, obviously being here, learning more, getting involved in community or citizen science. There might be projects in your area. Certainly there's an increasing amount of them on all over the world now, which is great. And we do use that data. It is helpful for us as researchers. Spreading the word, of course, you know, there are sorts of firefly-friendly land management practices that we've talked about today, of course, with light pollution. Even where you live is a source of light pollution, especially if you're close by habitat, or you're trying to, if you have a residential landscape or yard and you're trying to encourage experiencing fireflies at home. There are a lot of different management practices that you could do to make that habitat more suitable to fireflies.
Yeah, I'll just expand on this to say that I think we do have this, you know, we do have a pretty good idea of, and of course it's going to vary from place to place, of what you could do if you own property that you could do to maintain it as more firefly friendly. And of course, as I think Kelly's hit on, a lot of the things, it's managing the light pollution there, reducing light pollution, and I guess the simplest way to describe it is keeping as much of the habitat wild and natural as possible. I know here in the United States, there's you know, it's quite popular to have manicured lawns, you know, and those are very unfriendly to the vast majority of fireflies. And so being able to maintain more natural habitats in your backyard is really, really important. But I think, and this gets back to what I was saying in terms of one of the challenges for firefly conservation is that certainly that's not something all of us around the world have the opportunity to do. We don't all have, I mean, I'm fortunate I have a beautiful backyard. I can try to maintain wild for fireflies, but there are other ways I think that we need to get involved, and that really involves reaching out to other organizations that are managing land, whether it's your local parks, whether it is local orchards of some kind. It could be, Juan briefly alluded in his presentation to olives, to olive orchards, and around here where I am, it's apple orchards. And how do you get other landowners and land managers aware of the problems of fireflies and the fireflies are facing, and help to protect them? So I think that that's another really useful thing, getting involved in outreach and activity with other local and landowners.
Well, I would also add to participate, like, for example, here in Mexico, it's very useful to participate in the iNaturalist project. Of course, it's kind of difficult to identify a firefly species just with a photo, but of course, it gives us a great idea of which kind of species are in the area, or even if there are species. For example, when we opened the iNaturalist project, within like 2 weeks, we already had more than 3,000 photos from all Mexico. So it's that it's another way to contribute, of course.
Yes, and even I can say that for Europe, for instance, we are getting involvement of many people, of citizens all over Europe that are putting photos of fireflies from regions that we don't know the species well of. And sometimes we see photos of things we even don't know what they are. Maybe new species, or maybe larvae or females that aren't described yet for some species. So I think that's very important and interesting that people can now actually help the scientists by sharing what they have in their surroundings, in their gardens, to know better where they are. Okay, I see a next quite important question. What is the Fireflies International Network's next step forward for firefly conservation in the future? And I'm not sure, maybe Chris is maybe the best person to answer to this. Maybe it's a bit early, because what I can say is that the whole steering committee is fresh and we haven't had yet the chance to meet and to talk yet. But maybe Chris, you can tell us a bit more about that.
Certainly. I think that the biggest benefit of having an organization like this, Firefly International Network, is the international component to it, and the fact that it allows us to bring together ideas from around the world. I am inspired just by this forum alone and all the ideas that it's brought in, that I can bring and think about with Firefly Watch in our region here. And I think that we can strengthen that as well. I think there's more that we can do to connect the different community science projects that are going on around the world and learn from each other. I think that's one of my big goals going forward with Finn, is how do we build better connections between what's being done in Mexico City, what's being done in Thailand, and those are just a bunch of examples you've been hearing about today. What Kelly's doing in Georgia. There's so many different independent projects, and we have a lot to learn from each other and a lot of ideas to share, and that's a big piece of it. The other piece, in addition to the community science projects, is that there are, thanks to IUCN that you've been hearing about and Xerces, there are now some real even more intense scientific studies going on to try to look into conservation. I use that word cautiously, because what we do in community science work is very scientific as well, but there are opportunities on the one hand to engage the public, and opportunities in parallel with that to engage people, naturalists and other scientists around the world, in some real targeted efforts to identify where there are fireflies that are really in crisis that need to be preserved. So that's another, I think, big mission right now of the Fireflies International Network, is to see what we can do to help support what is really, over the past 3 or 4 years, been this, incredible upsurge in activity through IUCN and through Xerces, in terms of getting even more information and effort out there that's focused on conservation and focused specifically on identifying whether there are species that are threatened.
Thank you. I see here a comment that with the world change and rapid development, technique of keeping fireflies in artificial habitats seems to be important. And yeah, I also see that people here in Belgium are very happy to have fireflies in their garden. I'm only a bit worried because sometimes I hear people that are so in love with fireflies that they would put whatever species of firefly in their garden or in their park around. And sometimes I also had to warn that we cannot put, like, to say, Taiwanese species here in a pond in a garden. So I think sometimes we should be also be cautious. So what's your thought about this, dear panel of specialists on such issues?
Yeah, I mean, I don't think it's a bad thing that people might love fireflies so much that they desire to see this. Of course, it comes with that area of, you can build on that love for something to help someone learn more about it and why the species that's native to that area is important, and cultivate that love for that species, rather than, artificially changing the environment for something that shouldn't be there. So I think, it is a building block. Well, let's delve into this a bit more deeply, and understand why this species shouldn't be here in this garden in Belgium.
Yeah, I'm just afraid that sometimes we'll get the big soup of whatever species, or that there are coming problems because.
And can I have
Yes.
suggestions on this? I also think about the effect, like Raphael thing, because we are biologists and we don't want like a different or exotic species come in the natural habitat in Thailand. And I also think about the local genetic. We should care about the local genetic of the populations of the fireflies. So I try to keep the layering technique of fireflies in secret, because many people want to have firefly garden near their house, and they try to collect the natural population and try to rear it by self. And so they want to know this, and if they can do it successful, and so many fireflies population will be collected for the layering technique. And it's not easy, because I learned how to do the layering technique for a long time. It's like maybe for 5 years, and how to develop the technique. And I lost a lot of fireflies population, and so I try to keep it like a nature. So when we have like a project, like a restoration project, I have to collect the population nearby that area to conserve genetic, local genetic, and try to increase the population in the lab. And when we have another place, we do it again to conserve the local population of this. But now the problem is not the effect of the genetic, but is like at Hình Hoi Harmony. I collect the firefly population from outside area, and after 1 year later, the outside no more firefly habitat outside area, because the land modification happened, and Hình Hoi Harmony become to like a firefly oasis, and many animals, many fireflies from outside area come to this habitat to survive, because the land modification happened quickly within a year, and like I think the big problem of fireflies is no habitat for them. Thank you.
Thank you, Anchana. I also see a comment in the chat from Sergio that, of course, it's not only the fireflies themselves, but like also a bit mentioned by Anchana, their habitat and especially also their food, which are in many cases snails and slugs. So it's a rather bigger story than the fireflies themselves alone. I see that we are approaching 4 o'clock, which was the official ending hour of this Firefly forum. So I'm not sure if we still have time or much time to discuss further on all these interesting topics. So if it's good for all of you, I would like to say some last words. So some important messages I have is that fireflies can be a symbol to create awareness about how to not only conserve fireflies, but their actually their habitats, and to make a way how to live more in harmony with nature. To do that, we have to create awareness, and maybe that's the next step that Finn could go, is to find more tools to get awareness from the public, from governments, from local businesses, in order to know what is a firefly, and so on, to share maybe the magic of their flashes and glows with more people, and to come to a better understanding of fireflies, and to perhaps solve some problems that are pertinent in these days. One of the things we didn't touch today is that there are also some not only local things like light pollution and the use of pesticides, but also global threats like those that were mentioned by Sergio. I think about the global warming, the increase of droughts, maybe the increase because of droughts of wildfires in many parts of the world that are destroying more and more habitat, even within urbanized areas and so on. But anyway, I'm very happy to see that today we had this second Firefly forum, that we've been able to listen to talks of several speakers from worldwide that were able to tell us something more about ways how we can share space with fireflies, some success stories like the ones from Thailand. And by this, I would like to give the word back to Ms. Wan to conclude this beautiful forum. Please, Mrs. Wang, the word is yours.
Thank you so much, Dr. Raphael, for moderate our forums today. And also thank you to all our speakers for great presentation and such interactive Q&A. Thank you to everyone. Once again, I would like to say thank you to everyone for gracing our forums today with your presence. We truly appreciate it. On behalf of the organizing committees, I would like to apologize if we have done any mistakes throughout the event and also for the technical issue. I am my duty as master ceremony for today's forum. Have a good day and have a good weekend.